Like, it belongs in some game. It's not Diablo 2 or Diablo 3 or Diablo 4. But I don't think he's saying that either, right?
It just feels like Diablo 2 is already
to
straying away from that. As the action comes into the RPG, it's straying away from more of the RPG, traditional RPG-ish realism and survival elements to put more of a focus on the action and the combat.
Mm-hmm.
And at least to me, the most important RPG-ish elements in an ARPG is the character development and the builds and the gearing. To me, I want that part of it super fleshed out. Like, that's what's most interesting to me. It's not so much the realism aspect of those micro decisions, but more like, I only have this many skill points. How am I going to build this character? Build trees, skill trees, all of these RPG mechanics of different forms of progression. To me, that's like the really exciting RPG stuff. Mm-hmm. Not that I'm fundamentally opposed to like the more realism stuff. For anyone wondering, Dungeons and Dragons has been my favorite hobby since forever.
Nerd.
More than Diablo.
What up?
Yo, Mr. Llama.
There he is. I figure, you know what? We can play tag and do a turn-based React game here. Or we can just finally bring you in, and then that'll be way easier.
kind of dig the turn-based Reacts, though.
I mean, it was
in those old school D&D RPG elements, right?
It's fun, right? Yeah, I love it. There you go. Old school. Diablo 1 was going to be turn-based, right? You know that.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Apparently Brevik in an afternoon changed that to real time.
Yeah.
And thus the ARPG was born.
Exactly. All right. Perfect. We got it all set up here. Cool. Yeah. So how much time do you have, so I know what to budget for and what to account for? How much time do you want to spend on this?
Fresh.
I'm pretty flexible. It's mostly just in general in the evenings. Like, I finished supper and everything, but like
okay.
I want to spend some time with my fiance before she heads to bed.
I don't understand.
But like I have at least half an hour. I mean, I don't know if we have half an hour of stuff to talk about, but like I don't know how much time do you?
How do you say that? I don't know what that is.
Fiance?
Yeah.
My soon wife, I guess.
Oh, a soon wife. Okay, that doesn't
pre-wife.
That still doesn't resonate with me. Anyway, I thought we just play video games.
Cathos wedding band too.
Okay, is that the person that you talk to about Diablo 2 when the stream is off and you're still? I never got that far in the IRL RPG game. So random. Thank you so much. Mwah. Okay, so yeah, no, we have plenty to talk about. So where should we start? I think we have things. We've got like, obviously we have potions, cooldowns, D3 versus D2, RPG, ARPG, differential, and futures, and all of that. I mean, do we want to start broad and kind of dig in there? I haven't gotten to see your entire reaction because it was like 2 hours.
Oh, it was longer than that. Don't worry.
I was like, I thought it was like 10 minutes, and I'm just like watching through it, and I look and I'm like, when does this end? Well, it's great. It's super fun. But yeah, so I guess I'd love to hear from you. And chat, this is Rhykker, twitch.tv/RYHKKER, or YouTube. He's a big YouTuber. Sometimes just stuff on Twitch here and there. I don't know how often you're streaming nowadays versus YouTubing. But very cool guy, and we're going to keep it respectful, chat. But he represents the Diablo 3 half of Diablo, I suppose. And so he's also got great ideas, but I think there's a lot we agree on, and I think there's some that we disagree on, and that's totally fine. You can be adults and agree and disagree on stuff, and things are okay. So yeah, so I'd love to hear, I suppose, a little bit more in regards to Diablo the current state of ARPGs, where you feel they're at, where you feel they're lacking, where they should be going, kind of all of that.
Yeah, so thank you for the intro, by the way.
Right.
Yeah, so, and I think this sort of touches a bit upon kind of something you hit upon in your React. You hit upon something very poignant at the end where you're talking about kind of moving things towards a slower direction. Mm-hmm. And I'm kind of representing the fast-paced, but I don't know that I'm necessarily like that's the way I want things to go. I just see that's how they have gone. So if we're looking at these sort of mechanics, I become concerned about a game that might lose its identity between the two, where it's not sure if it wants to be fast or slow. Mm-hmm. So we've seen, over the years, that RPGs have evolved to be faster. That's what has happened. Whether that's good or bad, I'm willing to, I'm open to a slower paced game.
Okay.
What I wouldn't want, though, is slower paced elements in a fast paced game. I think that's when it creates that sort of confusion of identity.
Right.
So, like right now, Endgame in D3 and PoE, super fast,
very fast,
blitzing through maps. You would know more than me, but in D2, I think Endgame can be pretty fast. Not as fast, but still faster than...
gift for you.
It has speed to it, for sure. Yeah. Thank you, God. Diablo 2 Endgame, I mean... The biggest thing when I talk about like fast and speed and things of that, and when I compare Diablo 2 to PoE, whatever it is not exactly, it's do I care about what I'm fighting or not? I think that's the best way that I can put it. In Diablo 2, even when I'm end game, high level character, all of this stuff. My level 98 died yesterday to a giant pack of Oblivion Knight and their minion with Might Aura and all of this crap. It was terrible. I got one shot.
Is that hardcore?
No, it's softcore. Thankfully, I would be wearing way more survival gear if it was hardcore, though. I'm playing like super MF like crazy. But
I still lose a lot of XP though, right?
Oh yeah, no, it still sucks. Like I lost like 8 hours or something at least. So like for me, that's the big thing is Diablo 2. What I love, and I said that in that video. What's so iconic, so beautiful about the game is that every monster you care about. Is it a doll? Is it a soul? Is it a death lord? Is it like any monster anywhere, Oblivion Knights, like they all have meaning and importance because one, they're all immune to something in hell. There's like almost nothing that's not immune, just like one or two monsters. So they're all immune to almost something in hell. So you can't kill a third of them basically without some help or changing your skill build up or using your merce or whatever it is. And I'm not advocating for immunities completely in here, but I'm saying it makes monsters matter a lot more, but also just the speed at which your skills travel, their skills travel, all of these things. One stream I take off now and and so it just like has so much meaning there. And that was something that I found with PoE is like I couldn't even tell you what the monster was. It was dead before I could even see it. Everything just blew up. And while the boss fights I found were really fun and super interesting and way better than Diablo's boss fights and stuff, all of the regular clear, the maps, all of this stuff, it didn't matter until something was reflect and it was off screen and then I just died and I was like, wait, what killed me? And it was like, oh, okay. And I don't have a ton of D3, end game knowledge, but I felt like I also didn't super care when I did play it. Like that was many years ago, but even then I didn't feel like the monsters themselves had this really big weight and importance and all of this. It was just like dodge the beams and that was kind of it, and just gather everything together into little, groups. And then, so I don't know. And you can give me more of the D3 piece of that, but that was my like experience and why when I look at something in the future, when I say I want to slow it down, I say I want to slow it down enough to where like if that's an archer pack, or that's a lightning wisp, or that's a what, pit lord, like I want to care about that, because I move slow enough, their attacks, my attacks, everything, that I need to like move around and be really like strategic in how I'm fighting every kind of monster.
Yeah, I'm totally behind that idea. That's actually one of the things that I liked about Wolcen, which came out a few months ago, and kind of, but one thing I thought that it was doing well was that the combat itself, the monsters that you fight, they're challenging. At least before release, I don't know. They've issued some patches and stuff, maybe made it easier. I'm not sure, but I felt like every time I would engage a pack of enemies, the time to kill was slow.
Yep.
Not super slow, but slow enough to matter. I'm 100% for having those enemies not be just blobs of hit points that disappear.
Right.
That the engagements matter. PoE has that interesting dichotomy where it's either they instantly incinerate or it's the really tough bosses.
Right.
It's kind of one or the other there.
Right.
With D3, the vast majority of what you're doing is speedrunning and nothing matters. And then if you're pushing, the monsters matter, but not for the right reasons. It's like, okay,
they matter
these guys
for
are a lot of
experience,
XP.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. They for the progression and the rift. Yeah, we can say
Right.
XP. It's the same thing. But
Right.
you also care about the elite affixes, which again, it's not identity of the monster as it is what is the the D2 example would be, is it fire immune?
Yeah.
So yeah, I can see there being less of that identity when the monsters are being deleted. And D4 seems like it's going in the right direction. They say they want to slow down the game. The whole focus on monster families is very
cool.
interesting, really cool dynamics of having these monster types that are going to synergize. I love the idea of that. My fear is they're putting all this development effort into these monster families, and they say they want the game to be slower paced, but what's going to happen after 1 or 2 years? Are we going to have the same thing happen like all modern ARPGs where it ends up speed meta and then all
Path
this
of
development
Exile
effort goes to
started
nothing
slow.
because the monsters are deleted instantly.
Path of Exile started slow. Diablo 3 started out a lot slower, and then
absolutely.
And then I mean, even Diablo 2. Did you watch my 1.0 run at all?
I heard about it. I didn't have a chance to check it.
Okay, so I did 2 1.0 runs, and it is fascinating how much slower it is compared to it is literally speed meta completely. Diablo 2 now versus Diablo 2 then, because like back then experience was way harder to get. You couldn't buy mana potions, so if you were like a sorceress or whatever it was, you just had to wait for your mana to regen, or you would go to town and go talk to Akara every single time that you needed to refill your mana. And so it was slow. And so there's power creep in it for sure. But it started off very slow, and it crept and got to a place that I feel like was still okay, right? Where you still cared about everything. Whereas I feel like in the other games, the power crept to where nothing else mattered, and it was just, here's your gear, and now you shred everything sort of things. Something that somebody made a comment of that I really loved was they said, when Mr. Llama does a build guide, he talks about all of the different challenges that character will face along the way, and how you have to, using that specific character, go through and deal with those challenges, right? So this character is going to have a lot of difficulty in Act 3 because there's a lot of lightning immunes and blah, 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 this. So you're going to need to like use this and attack this way and maybe get this extra skill, all of this stuff. And then as opposed to when Rhykker does a guide for Diablo 3, it's here's all of the gear you need and the how you'll set your skills and everything there. And it doesn't have anything or near as much to do with like the combat and the like challenges that the character will face when you go out into the world. And
true, yeah.
And I think that right there is a good representation of it, of like where I think slow versus fast and what matters versus what doesn't matter. When I get a guide, I want somebody to have to explain to me how to play this character and where the good and the bad and all of the trouble in the combat and the areas and all of that stuff really matters, as opposed to here's your gear, here's your skills, now you can shred everything and just get going sort of stuff, you know. And I mean, feel free to once again disagree, because that's content. Feel free to disagree, you know.
Well, I mean, I guess I'll
with any
jump
piece of
in to
that.
say that there could be builds that do need to be explained. There are some builds that are really just self-explanatory and don't need to be explained. There are others that the rotation needs to be explained, or exactly how all the skills synergize and when best to use them needs to be explained. But yeah, I can't really think of anything that it's like you have to explain situationally depending on the monster type. Okay, fighting this monster, you have to do this. It is sort of one size fits all. Like, once you understand how the mechanics of the build works, yeah, as for the specifics of fighting different monsters, it's not like, well, this is weak versus, you know, lightning resistant monsters or anything like that.
Right. I really hope they bring that back. When, like, immunities maybe too far, but I really hope they bring monsters that are like 90% like lightning res, whatever, fire res, cold res into the game, so that you could make your way through everything, but it'll be way harder, and then you'll have to get that same sort of focus on those monsters. What do you think about that? I mean, that's my personal take, is I'm like, I would love if they brought like 95% resistance on a bunch of different monsters that made me consider how I fought them, you know, with a different character, whatever it is.
Yeah, so it's one of those things where it depends on what the fundamental kind of game is. If it's an idea that in principle sounds interesting to me, but if that were added to D3 today, all that means is, well, I'm going to skip those monsters.
Sure.
So if the result is that, then I don't think that's good, because we have in D3, like, if it's a Juggernaut, skip it. If it's this, skip it, because it's just not worth your time, and you can skip the content. But if it were in a game where you cannot do that and you're forced to adapt, right, then I could get behind that idea. So it sort of depends on what fundamental game we end up with. Because when there are things, I want it to be that we're making intelligent decisions and not just, I'm not going to do this content and that's my decision.
But you also in Diablo 3 don't have a mercenary that actually can like deal with that stuff either, right?
Correct.
Like, you're dealing with everything. In Diablo 2, I can have my mercenary solo the entire game at this point. Like, he's so stacked.
That's
and
awesome.
if I just like, you know, babysit him, give him potions, and, you know, make sure he doesn't get in the middle of stuff, but like, I could, you know, walk him through. And so for those kinds of monsters, having that mercenary is part of your build almost, right? What kind of mercenary do you want to use to deal with maybe some of those immune monsters or high res monsters? Or, you know, is there some sort of run multi-spec damage types, run firewall and frozen orb, whatever it is, so that you can like deal with that as well. And some of those monsters are mandatory, right, in the game, but some of them you can skip as well. So something that I do want to get your opinion on is what you were talking about rifts, and you have, for those who don't know, you have greater rifts in Diablo 3, and they're basically like timed challenges. You have to get enough experience within the rift and kill the boss within a certain amount of time. And personally, I really dislike the idea of bringing a time element into any of this, because then that shoves builds into speed builds and everything goes towards that speed meta. I can play a slower build that does a lot of damage and whatever, but if it's not fast enough, I'll never be able to push greater rifts to the level that a faster character could or whatnot. So I don't know. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah. So the time that we're given to do a greater rift is 15 minutes, which is not fast. If you're pushing and it's taking you 15, you're on a slow, methodical build. There's two main ways that people play Greater Rifts. One is speeding them in under 5 minutes,
Okay.
in which case you want a speed build. And then the other is when you're really pushing your limits at the hardest content of the game. 15 minutes is quite a bit, and you can be on a slow as a snail build. If you're not doing the content in 15 minutes, you probably just don't have enough DPS.
Right.
Is really what it comes down to. I like having different activities that can reward different types of builds and styles of play. There's too much focus on the speed meta, I feel. The most rewarding thing to do in D3, in PoE, is the speed meta, like, the vast majority of the time.
Right.
Very rarely do we find ourselves really pushing through the slow content, because there's just not enough reward over time for it. But having a greater balance in what is rewarded, like, I don't know that I would want, well, again, depending on what kind of game we make.
Right.
Like, I would be totally for having some builds that need, some content that you're going to push through with the slower build, maybe some content that you go through more quickly, and just having different types of endgame activities will maybe necessitate different builds from you to have different play styles represented.
Right. So I definitely, when I mean speed, I'm speaking about DPS a lot, and I think that's a big focus that I really hate in Diablo 3. I dislike a lot in Diablo 3 is that everything feels like it's DPS. And it, like, every stat on an item feels like it's DPS. Every the, like, timer forces there to be a lot of DPS. DPS is damage per second, chat. Like, everything just pushes towards more and more DPS. So, for instance, if I just picked a random item, Kayoshiro's Blade. Properties, 392 DPS, 628 to 750 dexterity, which is just more damage. Magic properties, 981 to 1175 elemental damage. Unique ability increases the damage wave of light by 150%. When the initial impact wave of light hits 3 or fewer enemies, the damage is further increased by 200 to 250%. It's just like damage, and damage. And I would love to see a shift in the items, in the play, and this is where that timer is, right? That timer says you need to have a certain DPS or you're not going to get out of this rift. And as opposed to maybe there's some, I go up and just try a Greater Rift 150 and I run this, like, real low DPS build and it takes me 2 hours to get through it, but, like, I'm able to get through it. Like, I'm not allowed to run that build because of the time limitations, because of, whatever. I need to increase my DPS to do so. Whereas for me, I think it's way cooler if I can grind at whatever pace I can, right? If I'm going through the Chaos Sanctuary and it's this slow, difficult, I'm fighting one monster at a time and kiting them back and all of this stuff, and it takes me 3 hours and I finally kill Diablo and I'm like, that was awesome. What a cool experience. But if I'm going through there and I get to the first seal and then it times me out and it's like, well, you didn't do enough damage, try again, then I'm like, oh, okay. It's like this artificial limit that just the whole focus of D3 feels very much like DPS focused. And I would love to see more focus on less speed and more, having items have those weird properties, have those chance for Frost Nova so that you have chance to proc CC and just kind of weird stuff on there. Things that get you those stats to wear your other gear and all sorts of things that are very much in this just style of some DPS elements, but also some other elements giving you hit recovery, giving you block chance, giving you whatever, right? Life, mana, yada yada.
Well, you're forgetting about one very important stat on Diablo 3 items that I'm sure you'd love.
Crit strike.
Cooldown reduction.
Oh, cooldown reduction too. God.
No, so it is true. Everything is very DPS focused. Like Diablo 2 has much more interesting itemization, like 100% for sure. The item attributes are more interesting. They're more meaningful. Everything basically, the itemization in D3 is like a solved system. It has been. You know exactly where to get all your DPS slots, where to get all your max toughness slots, and the only thing that really shakes that up is if you're running a build that needs certain cooldown benchmarks, then you got to sacrifice some DPS for cooldown. But for the most part, it's pretty straightforward, and having more interesting stuff definitely be appreciated. As for the timed content, I mean, theoretically, if you just play a regular rift and not a greater rift, you can take 2 hours to do it. No one's gonna stop you. It's greater rifts have become sort of the end all be all in D3.
Right.
But
I guess that's just all I know.
that's
is
the only
everybody
bit of timed content.
Yeah. That's just what everybody talks about and everybody does, and everybody, nobody talks about like, oh, I did rift, blah blah blah. Like nobody cares. It's like, what's your greater rift?
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. That's why we need more. We need more different activities to do at the end that aren't all focused on the same thing.
Yeah. Okay. What other thoughts do you have? I mean, you just talked about cooldown reduction, so let's hash out the cooldown stuff just fully right here.
Totally.
Let's
So totally agree with you. Long cooldowns. Nope. Don't like that at all. I don't even know that I would necessarily argue for cooldowns. I was just the reason I watched your first video on stream, because I've watched your other feedback videos, and I pretty much agree with everything. But I had heard in that one that you were going to talk about cooldown and potions, and I'm like, oh well, here's something that I could maybe have a bit of a different opinion on.
Right, content.
But like just to play devil's advocate for cooldown, yeah, exactly. Like 5-10 second cooldown on a skill that is for strategic use, mostly defensive stuff, like, it's okay. I don't know that I would argue like that it must be in the game,
right?
But I think cooldowns can be done well. I don't like how they're done in D3, but I could see there being some argument made that there's some merit that could be had there.
So when I look at cooldowns, there's a couple things that I see from it. I love cooldowns in a game with PvP. That focuses on PvP, I should say. Because a game that focuses on PvP creates a game where your opponent now is smart enough to punish you, right? So look at Dota 2, right? I don't know if you've played any Dota 2 or MOBAs, but like, fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. I have a stun once every 8 seconds. I have an ultimate once every 100 seconds, right? Things like this that can shift and change the entire swing of a battle. And yet, they become so important because, I wasted my ultimate. Now the other team knows that for 100 seconds I don't have that, and they can take, Roshan. They can push the tower. They can do whatever because they're not worried about it. Or if they are worried about it, now they have to play this entirely different. They're more spaced out. How they're trying to siege is this entirely different thing because they're always aware of my ultimate ability, whatever it is, right? So I love cooldowns in those games whenever there's that PvP focus, because then as soon as you miss something, as soon as you shoot something, whatever it is, they know, okay, that skill's on cooldown now, and they can then take advantage of that. So I love a cooldown in that regard. In a game where there's just mindless AI, I don't see the point of the cooldown, because it just creates this like I said, kind of this cycle, right? Diablo 3, when you're explaining a build and creating a build, you just kind of like, maybe you go through the cycle that the character will do. Right, so you're gonna do this, and then this, and then this, and then this, and then that's off cooldown. So you do this again, and like, you just kind of like go through your cycle of it. But I don't feel like you get good engagement from it. They're not taking advantage of you using a spell, and over here and not over here. They're just all charging at you, trying to kill you always, right? So
Well, I mean, there are cases where you might be expecting like a big damage spike, right?
Yeah. Um,
Yeah. So
like I said, I
I
think
think the
the
only like
diamond
usage
skill.
case of cooldowns that I
Oh, sorry. You go ahead.
sorry.
Just go ahead. We're just hitting on each other.
Yeah. So I think like the only usage case that I could really argue for having short form cooldowns would be, um, first off, you need enough, abilities that are based on your resource, be it mana, be it whatever. But sometimes you reach a point where it's like, okay, well, this is a cool ability, but it's not worth me taking if it's consuming the same resource as these other skills. But if it's on a cooldown instead, then okay, yeah, I can work this into my build, and it's another thing that I can use situationally because it's not, it's not important enough that it's worth sacrificing mana for instance.
Right. Um. Yeah. So I don't know. For me, I don't think Diablo 2 is perfect here either. I think this is an area that Diablo 4 could really improve on overall. Is, Diablo 2 definitely gets to be more into that spam your one skill, whatever it is. And a lot of this comes from the fact of synergies and how much they implemented in, like, you create an ultimate build that's like Blizzard, and everything is Blizzard, Glacial Spike, Ice Blast, Ice Bolt, Cold Mastery, right? You've dumped all of your skills into this, and so now all you have are those skills, and you just use Blizzard and maybe Ice Blast for single target DPS and maybe Glacial Spike for AoE. And I still think it ends up being really fun, but I do think that could be made in a cooler way, right? I think there's definitely a possibility of, allow me to open that build up a little bit more. Maybe there's synergies don't require all of my skills for this ultimate build. And so, maybe like I run Blizzard and I can also run Meteor and I can also run Nova, and then I can really start to use, those skills in their various areas, depending what monster I'm fighting, depending whatever it is. And I can kind of decide how much I want to do with, each of those. And to the point where maxing out one thing is only going to get you so far. And so you're going to do some more, you're going to switch it up here and there. So there's something there that can be improved upon for sure in Diablo 4. But I think the cooldown is the wrong way to do it, I guess, right? I think forcing you to use another skill because you can't use that skill since it's on cooldown is kind of boring. A boring solution, and allowing you to spam one skill all the time and that being completely effective is also a little bit of a boring solution. I think the best solution is creating skills that are so unique that they have their use cases in every different area. And so it becomes this idea of, do I want this quick shot? Do I want this skill that maybe has a wind up or a slower casting speed? Do I want this skill that has this big AoE? Do I want this skill that has a chill effect? Do I want this, right? Like, and Diablo 2 has that somewhat, right? Like, let's say I'm running my Blizzard, my current level 98 sorceress. She has Blizzard. She uses teleport for her movement skill, obviously. She has Blizzard, she has Glacial Spike, she has Ice Blast, she has Static, and she has Fireball. And so I kind of shift between those skills depending on what type of monster I'm fighting, where the grouping is, all of that. But I'm still main DPSing Blizzard, so I think there could still be some improvement there. But I just really hate the cooldown idea of it, because I think it's just you're no longer letting me make that decision, right? I'm all about decisions. And with that, I don't get to make the decision anymore. I'm just being told that this isn't allowed.
Yeah, it's a really fair point. I know that when I first played D3 and I saw cooldowns, I hated the idea of it. I've become okay with it.
Mm-hmm.
I still dislike the super long cooldowns. I hope those don't make it into D4. I tolerate short cooldowns, but like what you described about having different skills equipped for different situations, I think that makes for exciting gameplay. The way D3 works, you have one damage skill. Like all the time, you just have one skill.
Right.
One of your 6 equipped skills is your DPS, and everything else is supporting the build. And your build is something that is supposed to be able to deal with pretty much all situations. It's not like, okay, I have this other damage skill in reserve for this usage case, which would be cool, but it's just not the way the itemization works out. You're
Right.
rewarded for dumping all your DPS into one skill, which relegates your other 5 into somehow supporting your build, be it through grouping enemies, be it through defensive buffs, offensive buffs, and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's improvement there from both games to go forward with it. Okay, now it's your turn. I want you to drop some hot opinion on us here.
A gift for you.
Thank you.
Oh, let's see.
What do you got? Hot takes with Rhykker. If not, I can bring something else.
Oh man, my mic mute. I'm sorry about that. I don't know how long I was muted for.
It was a good 20 seconds, maybe.
Yikes! What was the last thing I said?
Nothing. You didn't respond at all.
Wonderful. Okay. Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah. So the big thing that for me, I think will probably be like the hottest take was about potions.
Mm-hmm.
None of that came through at all. No. Okay. So
no, you said
so
nothing.
Potions. Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah. So the potion system. Is probably like the thing that is my hottest D2 take. That I really don't like the D2 potion system. The things that I do like about it is picking, between what kind of resources you want. But the aspect that I don't like is having, you could choose to have a bunch of potions cluttering up your inventory and not just your belt slot. And then you're making the choice between convenience of having more room to pick up items or saving yourself trips to like get more potions. And
Right.
if the potions are like all in the belt slot or there's some other way to manage it, like I'm a lot more okay with potions. But yeah, I think that's like my hottest take.
Okay. So you, I guess, lay out more your like ideal potion setup scenario here, because I think we actually agree with this. To be honest.
Yeah, probably. So I think we both like the idea of PoE flasks in principle, but the implementation has worked out to be unfortunate in that it's
very unfortunate.
Spamming. We don't want that.
Nope.
Yeah. So what things that I like itemization slots. So turning potions into more itemization slots, very interesting to me. Making choices over what kind of potions to have. Having potions or flasks with affixes. I love affixes.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, them being mandatory to be spamming because they give you some buff that you always want up in combat is taking it too far. Definitely agree with you about the 30-second cooldown on the potion just kind of encourages you to play it safe for 30 seconds and then re-engage, which is not desirable.
Right.
Gameplay. Yeah, so if it could be made into itemization and then have some way of it replenishing that does not allow you to just, I guess, go back and like buy more or whatever. I think we agree that no boss fight, teleporting out, rebuying potions. I think we agree that it's good to have the boss fights be a self-contained thing.
The D2 potions are legendary.
Yeah, other than that, like I don't have a solid like idea. I know what I don't like more than I know what I like, because I've yet to have a game where it's like I love this potion system.
Yeah.
I love the idea of PoEs in principle until I found out I got to learn the piano.
Yeah.
How about you?
I think that, I think you speak truthfully there, and that there's not a game that has a perfect potion system that I've played yet. Every game, every potion system I've encountered has some flaw in some way. I do enjoy endgame Diablo 2 potion style, where you're running that mixture of like your life and mana potions are regen over time. Your rejuve potions are instantaneous but are harder to come by. And so you're kind of going through... It's a resource that you're not always spamming, because if you always spam it, then you run out. You only have 16 potions. And so whenever you find a new potion, then you like drink a potion, pick up your new potion, whatever it is. So I feel like it has an okay flow to it, to be honest. Obviously, when you're speedrunning, you're just spam buying potions and filling, 3/4 of your inventory. I don't think speedrunning is is the place to exactly look at with all of it. But, I think that has some value in it right there. But I can understand people's idea of it being annoying maybe and just a little too much, right? At the same time, I hate the idea of a potion that is always existing and maybe just has a cooldown or something like that. I think that's a terrible potion idea. The flask are an interesting idea. They're very much like a Diablo 2 potion belt, except you're not picking up the potions off the ground. They're just refilling as you kill stuff. And I think that's an interesting idea. I think there could be potential for like, what if we have the flask system, but they have a lot more charges, but then they only refill when you like go to town or something, right? Or if you find a shrine that refills them or whatever it is right there. So then there becomes this like, okay, you can get through a decent amount of content with your flask, but they aren't this ultimate thing. They aren't this ultimate like piece right there that is whatever. At the same time, the flask aren't becoming PoE flask in the the buffing flask. I think the buffing flask is terrible. When the flask has something that will increase your DPS or increase whatever to this point where you have to have it always on, then it just gets insane and ridiculous. And so I love the idea of a Path of Exile flask that's just a life or mana flask, and that's it. And then it can have the affix like a thawing potion or a poison, right? Like gets rid of poison, gets rid of freeze, gets rid of whatever, bleed. I love the basic flask within PoE. I think it's super cool. But the problem is it just turns into awfulness. And then, and then a lot of the builds eventually don't even care about like health and mana potions, because they're just these crazy leeches that just mass leech insane amounts of life and mana all the time. And then all 5 flasks just become this rodeo of buffs. And, I don't know. To me, that's where it all went wrong. So like dropping a lot of that off, but having Path of Exile style flask where it's just health, mana, and then the affixes, I think is a great way to do it.
Sign me up. What are your thoughts on health globes in D3?
What do you mean? Health globes, you pick them up and you just get health, right? When it drops.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay, yeah. I mean, they seem fine. I don't know. They seem a little bit console-y to me, But what if, they could turn into potion charges. That could be a way to refill your flask, right? Instead of you picking up the flask, it drops globes. You grab a globe, your flask gains another charge, right? And all of the flasks have like 20 charges or something like that. 10 charges. I don't know what the number is. I think that could totally be a simple way to do it. That's not the PoE system at all, Yorick. PoE is you kill stuff and that you gain your flask recharge from killing things. This would be you have flask that you can pick up globes to refill. They have a lot more charges overall, and they are only meant for potion and some like affix. But even all those affixes, I think, still should be potion style things, such as a stamina potion, or well, we don't need stamina, but a thawing potion, an antidote potion, just something to deal with the things that you deal with, ailments. I think that's actually a decent style system.
Absolutely. Another reason why that is would be, so one of the issues with PoE's flask system of replenishing on killing enemies is that they fundamentally have to alter the way they develop the game and its boss fights to always have adds so that you're always able to refill your flasks.
Right.
If it's health globes that drop, or whatever, refill globes that drop as a consequence of just hitting the same guy over and over, then you've solved that problem as well.
Yeah, I think that's definitely one thing that I always wondered with the PoE boss fights was like, and now there's always a time for the ads to come out so that you can refill your charges before the next phase of the boss fight, because it's like this, they've forced it to be like that. But it's kind of the same thing. It is a little bit the same thing,
because your voice sounds like the llama from Disney's The Emperor's New Groove.
Well, I mean,
if
you want to have some fantasy of a boss where you're just fighting like Diablo and there's no ads, and then you're forced to put ads to replenish, I think like that feels like that's different.
Yeah. I don't know. I think there's, I think we're both in agreement here. Path of Exile had the best attempt at a potion system, and then it went wrong. But if you copy and then improve, I think it ends up being really great.
Absolutely.
I think there's something there for sure. So I hope that they steal and then improve. How do you feel about crit?
Yikes.
How's your crit
I'm
stuff?
not opposed to crit chance, I guess.
Okay.
But the way crit chance and crit damage stack is just, it's awful design because you're always wanting to stack these two stats together. Mm-hmm. I think having effects that can trigger on crit would give me some reason to want to retain crit chance, but not crit damage as well, if that's the case. Because then you always want to stack them everywhere because they're so powerful that it removes choice rather than adds choice.
Right. Completely agree. That is probably one of my biggest fears for Diablo 4, is that they're going to come in with crit chance and crit damage, and you're going to get builds that are 900% crit strike damage with, 100% crit chance or 90% crit chance or whatever, and it's just going to be disgusting. Like, crit exists in Diablo 2. A lot of people don't always know that. But Diablo 2, Deadly Strike is crit. So that's a crit chance. But it's just double damage. That's it. And there's no way to improve that. You can't have this crazy 1000% damage, whatever it is. It's just, you got a 20% chance for Deadly Strike. All right, 20% of the time you're going to do double damage. And it's simple, it's still effective, it still works in some builds, but it's not this disgusting thing that needs to be implemented all the time, that you have to always focus on, whatnot. So that is definitely my biggest fear from seeing the itemization that they've sent out so far, is they're showing crit. They're showing, so much of the items, I want to see. So much of the items are DPS and improve, more damage. And it just worries the crap out of me. Yeah, they've got crit strike damage.
There's definitely like a lot of question marks around D4's itemization, and a lot of people are looking forward to future updates. There's sort of like a pushback of like, well, they're still early on and they haven't put too much effort into that stuff because they're focusing on more big picture stuff. But obviously for a lot of us, itemization is one of the most important things, and so
Yeah.
there's a lot of eyes on that topic for sure.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see. Any other hot takes? Any other things you want to disagree with? A flashy title I can create. Rhykker said what? You know.
Oh man. Stamina. I definitely feel like we need more stamina. No, actually, I don't even think. Actually, maybe you. I was saying that as a joke, but would you be in favor? What do you feel about stamina?
No, just get rid of it. It was a mistake.
Okay. What if the game were a slower game though?
I mean, I'd love a slower game, but you still don't need stamina. It's just so pointless. I mean, it's just annoying. That's all. We don't need to bring that back. God. Yeah. I mean, you know, all of that really goes back to like when they created Diablo 2, they were creating a slow game. They were playing a lot of EverQuest. They had Diablo 1 and everything was just slow. And so this like fast running all the time was like this crazy idea almost, you know. And that's why they had like the affixes of like increased maximum stamina and stuff. Like you might actually create a build that was supposed to increase the amount of stamina you had.
But I put my 2 weeks in at medieval times.
Oh,
that's interesting.
Yeah, so you know, and there's definitely so much of that I love. I love all of the RPG and how much of that came over, how difficult Diablo 2 was and still is, all of those pieces. But I'm also like, yeah, some of it was a little much, like stamina. We didn't need anything.
Oh, I maybe have something that you would disagree with. I know a lot of my chat earlier was disagreeing with it about trading, fully open trading versus trading with restrictions.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in favor of trading with restrictions. How do you feel about that?
What restrictions are you in favor of is my question.
Well, so where we draw the line exactly is very up for debate for me, but I think the idea that there are some things that you can't trade for, I think it's a good idea. And that said, what I do want, and I need to stress, is that if you get a god drop, that you can trade that. But that maybe the best items in the game are somehow items that you've gotten as a god drop or something, and then you've enhanced them somehow through your own agency or through, I don't know, crafting or something like that. And maybe like the absolute top best of the best items are not tradable because you've invested something in them to make them something more than they were when they dropped. Something like that.
So to me, that adds value to why it should be tradable.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I spend all of this time and I'm invested in creating this ultimate amazing item and I have it at the end, I would love to be able to trade that item off. And like, that's like, you know, eventually you gotta kiss it goodbye and let it go to someone else who's gonna use it in some new fascinating way. And then I'm going to take all of my new loot from that trade and just do whatever I want. And it's gonna be amazing. You know, like when you shut that down, the value of that just drops immensely for me when I can't trade it anymore. Like I almost don't care about it. You know, it's like cool to create for myself, but there's also the idea of, and you know, I talked about this before when we had our discussions a long time ago, which was like whenever it's the Wild West, it allows you to play the game in a different way, right? If I want to get the best items in Diablo 2, I can either play the game where I go out and I farm like a madman to go get those best items, or I can play my own game of like, I'm I'm gonna play the trading game, because this is something that I used to do in Diablo 2. There was an entire season where I don't think I stepped out of town. I literally like went into town. I would just join a game that would say Shaco for Umrune, and I'd be like, ooh, an Umrune, and I'd join and get an Umrune, and then I'd create a game and I'd be like, Umrune for Shaco and Lemrune, and then I'd get a Lemrune and a Shaco, and then I would that's all I did. I just traded for an entire season. I spent probably like 800 hours in that season, never playing the game, but just trading. And I got filthy rich with all of these awesome items. And eventually I built some PvP characters with it and had some fun with those. But like, I was just having a great time just trading up. And I eventually ended up with all of these high runes and perfect COAs and awesome like griefs and just like all sorts of cool items, because I was just having fun trading. And that was such a great experience for me that I was like, if I can't trade, then you're telling me the only way to play the game is to make a build, and the only builds I can make if I want to get the cool items are the ones that can do the content to get those items, and everything I feel like becomes more centralized and focused purely on that regard, as opposed to maybe I just want a PvP and that's all I want to do. And so I don't want to create farming builds to go out and farm for the items and farm for all those gear. And is it equipped to just my character? Can I even shift it over to my other characters on my account? I don't know. But, maybe whatever it is, maybe I just want a PvP. And so I just want to trade, get all the cool items from trading, because I did a bunch of wealth growing by just finding, these tiny trades here and there and doing that. And then I PvP, and it's awesome. And what I even love specifically with the Diablo 4 world is how cool would it be if you could only trade locally? And so whatever area you're in on the map, like you can only trade with people around you. I think that makes it even cooler, because that kind of brings me back a little bit to the Diablo 2 trading and what made it so great before D2JSP really came around and became annoying. Or too much, too easy, you had to go hunting. You had to sit there and find where were the good items. You'd sit there and wait for a game that would appear that had a good trade, and then you'd jump in and trade and all that stuff. So I don't know. I think that would be an interesting way to it, but I think you gotta have open trade. If you start limiting items to just characters, just build, just whatever, you're once again telling the player how to enjoy the game instead of letting them just enjoy it how they want.
Well, you touched upon an interesting thing there, and I guess the bigger question then is how much say should the devs then have in how a game is played? Because on one hand, you have games that are completely open sandboxes that are designed to like have players find their own way, and then you have more like tailored experiences. And so, one thing you said, for instance, is you spent that whole ladder season, as you said, not playing the game. You were just trading and not playing like the content that the devs, made. So at what point, I guess, how much say should the devs have in kind of developing the game such that you're kind of playing the content that they made as opposed to finding ways to not?
I don't think it matters. I guess, like, if they create this game and everybody comes in and like loves the trading and all of this, then like let people play like that. I think the big piece there is the devs should really focus on creating a good experience that is fun to play, just regardless of any other piece, right? It's just like fun to go and play the game, and they create an interesting campaign, which is something that, God, I hope they don't redo the D3 campaign where it's just like, just get through it. Right? They create an interesting campaign, and then they create interesting endgame content after that, and let people enjoy that. And some people are going to want to play through it multiple times. Some people will play through it once and then just want to trade. Some people will play through it and then just want to PvP. Like, let people kind of pick how they want to play, but like, don't force people into your content and like make that be the thing of like, you're going to enjoy it, you know? Like, create something that's enjoyable and they'll come to it is my thought there.
How do we stop the sort of D2 JSP and the botting and the botters from overrunning the economy and all that kind of stuff, giving the devs kind of more work to have to stop the trading from impacting people because of the effect of the real money market and stuff like that. By the way, I'm just
Yeah.
I'm not for or against anything here. I'm just making conversation.
I don't think you do. I think you just have to have the devs be, or the, you know, Blizzard be really involved. And whenever they see people engaging in that, whenever they see botting, whenever, you know, they just have to be nonstop hunting that stuff down. And then I think, you know, it's going to exist, but like, every time, you know, if you have to buy this game and it's $60, and every time that you do that and you get banned, and you know, you have to get a new key, or, you know, like, eventually it kind of stops becoming worth it. So
Does it though? I mean, it's been a thing in Diablo history since D2 days, and D3 it's still a thing. The cost hasn't been an issue for botters at all, ever.
sure, but how aggressive are they with it? I feel like they just need to up their aggression.
Not very. No.
To be honest. Right, they're not very, like, there is massive, the number one person on the Greater Rift leaderboard right now is 100% a botter, and everybody knows it. And he's got 24-hour uptime over and over and, you know, every single day, and they're not doing anything about it. So like, you know, you can't sit here and tell me that like they're doing all this stuff and that's why it's not worth it. They're not doing anything for it. If they really want to be aggressive, push out ban waves, mass ban waves over and over and over again, and just hunt them down. Do what they did like in World of Warcraft, where they would teleport a character to them and like talk to them or something, you know? And if that person didn't like respond, or just like went through a bot action or whatever it was, and they ban them, like, they can do stuff to be proactive here. And that, I think, is how you discourage it. Whenever you see that stuff, if people are, you know, doing stuff with JSP, maybe release a statement that says like, yo, we're not going to allow JSP for this game. We're not going to allow this stuff. And then they can go on like JSP and pretend to make trades. And when people join in, they can ban them. I don't know. Like, there's stuff you can do that's like sneaky, whatever stuff, that just creates enough doubt in people's minds that they go, maybe I'm not going to try this because there's a good chance I get banned. And then that's
so just
when they
to play
stop.
devil's advocate here.
Mm-hmm.
On one hand, you got the devs working on like content and new zones and whatever, and then they like turn on trading, which is just like, you know, free trading for everyone. They don't put much dev effort into it.
Sure.
But then because of all these other things of the bots and whatever, they have to take on this a huge amount of extra work to stop the trading from becoming illegitimate and all that. Isn't it just easier for them to just not allow trading at all and not have to take on all of this extra effort to stop all these trading problems? Again, I'm not
Sure.
advocating for this, but just for the sake of you know, content.
Yeah, totally. And why not just like not even develop a game, and then you never have to deal with any of it? I mean, you can take away awesome features of games and just make a crappier game so you don't have to deal with issues, or you can create a better system, manage it better, and then you have a better quality game in the end. Like, to me, it's a terrible argument, because it just like,
Well, so the argument is, if it's an aspect of the game that the players are kind of making and developing on their own, and then it's just giving the devs extra work to manage it all of a sudden, when they had developed the kind of this other thing that they, you know, maybe players don't like the base game, which would be sad.
well, then
and
that's
they're all
their
playing
fault.
this other side of it.
You know, like,
What was that?
that's their fault then.
Oh, yeah.
You know, develop a game that people want to play. But
Yeah, that's fair.
you know, like, yeah, like trading obviously brings in real money trading, sites like D2JSP, botting, right? Like it brings those things in. But just like I feel like it's such an important part of the game. It adds so much to a game that you just have to like hire some people to deal with it. You know, Blizzard's a multi-billion-dollar company. They can pay a couple dudes to go in. D4 is going to make a lot of money. They can pay a couple dudes to go in and make it a much better experience, right?
Yeah, I wonder if like PoE has the right approach of just having solo self-found and trade league, and so
Yeah.
because people are kind of split. Like some people like really are totally in favor of trading.
Yep.
Others don't like it, and maybe that's just the
And
solution.
I love solo self-found. I play solo self-found all the time when I play Path of Exile, and I think that's a great easy way also to for the people who don't want trading and don't want to be involved, and maybe there's even like PvP that exists in a solo self-found world. And so you only fight against other people in solo self-found, right? Like, so then you can create this other world where there's no trading and everybody's just finding their own stuff along the way, and you're competing against and being around people that also are solo self-found. And so it's, if you want to be in the trade league, you go in the trade league. If you want to be in the SSF, you go in the SSF, and you're around people who are experiencing the same way that you are. I think that's a fantastic idea, and they would be foolish not to implement something like that.
I think the limited trade is an attempt at making both sides of the camp happy without splitting up the player base into, because like we could theoretically get to a point where it's like, okay, solo, softcore, hardcore, solo self-found, and as we keep fragmenting as the player base becomes increasingly divided, and
Sure.
I think we agree at some point it would be too much fragmentation and there's lack of a cohesive community.
I don't know. I disagree.
There's some. You think that there's no limit to which you can keep fragmenting and it's not going to do harm to the game?
There's eventually a limit. I don't think 4 factors is a limit that decides that decides it. Hardcore, softcore, SSF, trade league. Like we've seen it work in
What about
Diablo
seasonal,
2. Yeah, sure, and you can even go that. We've seen it work in other games, and that's where it is, right? Path of Exile, you have seasonal and non-seasonal. Hardcore, softcore, SSF, trade league. Diablo 2, you have 4 servers with seasonal, non-seasonal, hardcore, softcore, right? Like you can fragment off, and I still think you're totally fine. I think there's.
And what
there's
about how about PvP servers?
No, you just have PvP on that. You just put that on the same server.
But what if people want open world PvP where they can fight anybody in their server? What if there's a big enough push for that and they're like, okay, well, we'll add another like fragment, and then you have to have the PvP server for solo self-found, PvP server.
I mean,
for
if they want to split off into, you know, all of that, then that's fine. I think you just do a flag. You just say I'm open to PvPing or not. You turn it on when you want to fight, and if you don't, then you don't put it on. But if it gets big enough, if you have, you know, 10 million, 20 million users, let's just say 10 million, like, you can totally do that, right? World of Warcraft, how many servers does World of Warcraft have?
Yeah, but I mean, it didn't start with that, right?
Right, but how many did they end up with?
But yeah, so it's totally, if you can have the player base, you can totally do it.
Yeah.
But like what we observe with a lot of, you know, less fortunate MMOs is as they enter their twilight, they have to start consolidating servers because there's just not enough
sure,
players.
and that's I'm not saying that this is going to be some magical thing that's not going to go through the life cycle of a game where like they start out and they can run 20 servers and it's great, and then 10 years from now they consolidate it down to just 10 servers, right? You know, like sure, you can do those things, but I don't think that having you know, a bunch of servers like that is crazy. I still don't think you need a PvP flag or server. I think you just have a flag and that's easy enough. And people will naturally congregate to PvP areas and stuff. But you know, I don't know. I don't think that that's a crazy number of limiting factors. It's not like this is a sorceress's only server. This is a server for only people who want to run with Taurash's set. This is a server for people who are above the age of 30 and like My Little Pony, right? Like, we just, let the community develop and create these things themselves. We will create the PvP area. You don't even have to define it. We will create it. That's the beauty. And that's where like overdeveloping and over micromanaging can be an issue. Just put all of us on the server, and naturally people who want to fight will congregate to certain areas. And then there will just be an area that's just known as like, when you want to fight, you go to Haragoth. And that's it, right? And like, that's where all the fighting happens. That's like the top duelers always hang around there. The community will naturally do that. So,
man, I miss game lobbies.
Right? Game lobbies are amazing.
Yeah, I hated when games moved away from that.
Yep.
Because of consoles. That was the big reason.
Exactly. And consoles ruined everything. And now they're trying to develop. Okay, so what do you think about this? So one of my biggest complaints and biggest gripes and worries for Diablo 4 is that they are developing for both a console and a PC. And this happened with Diablo 3 as well, even though the port didn't come till later. You can see that the design of the game was built with console in mind. And I personally believe you cannot make a game that is amazing for console and amazing for PC. You have to sacrifice on both ends, and thus you end up with a game that is mediocre because it's half trying to be good to the console players, half trying to be good to the PC players.
Yeah, I'd largely agree with that. I'd say it's more about the control setup than the consoles, necessarily, because like arguably you could have like a controller on a PC. But yeah, I mean,
yeah, control versus
keyboard. Every couple years that cost
like if something is
dollars.
designed for one type of input, right? Like a keyboard is not a controller. The layout is different. It's gonna have different ergonomics. Same thing with a mouse control. Yeah, so I would agree that you're going to make sacrifices in order to ensure something runs, I do think it's possible to make something run well on both, but you have to make some concessions, and it's not going to feel exactly the same way on controller as it is on mouse and keyboard. I'm a big mouse and keyboard guy. I dislike controllers. If one of the big reasons I never played consoles was just general lack of mouse and keyboard support.
Yep. Yeah, I've always been a mouse keyboard kind of person as well. And like, there's games that I think are way better on console or way better on controller, Like, there's just certain games, and I mean, Diablo 3 I think plays better on a console than on a PC. That's me personally. But like, I don't know. Fighting games I think really do well on controllers, right? Like, fantastic. I prefer racing games on controllers, right? Like, there's a definite style of game that I really enjoy. FIFA, for sure. Lots of sports games are better on controllers. But ARPGs, I think, are better on PCs when they're complicated, and they're better on consoles when they're like Gauntlet Legends. It's like just kind of hack and slash and chill and have some fun. And so when you try and create something that's deep enough for PC but casual enough or chill enough for console controller, it creates this weird mix. And I don't know. There's very few games. I have heard before Skyrim is great on both. There's probably a couple games that are good on both, but even then they probably make some concessions. So
I feel that when Skyrim launched on PC, it definitely suffered as a console port. You had to run mods to fix the UI. It was it was a great game, but it definitely suffered because of console release.
Yeah. All right. I know that you're engaged and you have actually other people in your life that matter. So I will let you get back. I'm sure I've taken more of your time already. Quick last question: crunchy peanut butter or smooth peanut butter?
Oh boy. I guess this is my last hot take. I prefer smooth. I don't know if my chat didn't like that when I said smooth.
Yeah, no. Okay, we agree then. All right.
Oh, wow.
I need something that we vehemently disagree on so I can have
say
this
GIF instead of GIF.
I say GIF too. Dang it, Rhykker. Renting versus buying. What are your thoughts on the rent versus buy debate? Renting a, apartment, house, whatever, buying a house. Is renting throwing money away? What's your thoughts there?
So, yeah, that's without a super quick answer. Okay. If you are renting and investing the other money that you'd be saving, then you'll end up with more money in the end. Otherwise, if you're not going to be like really good with investments with that extra money, you're probably better off buying, in my opinion.
Gosh dang it. All right. Well, we just agree on everything. So.
Whoa. My brother from another mother. I can't talk like that. I'm sorry.
That was maybe we disagree on that right there.
Spreadsheets are engaged.
I guess engaged or single. There's our disagreement.
Like which is better, or which are we?
I mean, it doesn't matter. We know what your answer is going to be regardless. Has to be. No. Okay. Yeah. Rhykker, thank you very much for joining us and clearing things up, having some fun.
Wait, we're both of Italian heritage?
Yeah. My last name is Sementelli.
È vero?
I don't speak
Italian.
Ciao,
Okay.
Yeah, I don't speak it. I'm sorry.
Cool.
My family decided not to teach me for some reason. They were like, "You're gonna be American and grow." That was a very big thing. Like with their grandparents and stuff, they came over and were like, "We're not gonna teach Italian because you guys need to be American, and we want you to speak English and integrate well." So
interesting. Oh, how do you say the Luigi's brother? How do you say his name?
Mario, but you can also say Mario. That's totally cool. I'm like good with it.
Okay. All right. Thanks so much for having me on. This was a blast. We've chatted a bit like through Twitter and stuff, but I think this is the first time like we've spoken voice to voice. So thanks so much for having me on.
But
yeah, I've tons of wonderful ideas. I hope Blizzard is listening to and watching your videos. I'm sure they are. I know they are.
Yeah.
Listening to, watching your videos and your feedback. And yeah, looking forward to all of us playing D4 together.
I can't wait, man. Thanks so much. All right, we'll catch you later.
All right, thanks, buddy. Bye.
Bye, Rhykker. Cool. Finally got the legend in here. That good to see.
That
good
was
to
nice.
have. That was nice.